So recently I watched a video on the fallacy of Sabine Hossenfelder. Now I've talked about Sabine before. I rather like some of her work. I'm not a particular fan of hers for various reasons. But I thought this video was a great example of manipulation and how it works, especially on YouTube. And so I wanted to go through it in a commentary so that you could see some of the tricks that are being used on you when you engage with some of these videos. And so this isn't your standard commentary video. I mean, I'm doing it as a commentary video. It did the first attempt, of course, got wiped out. Don't know why the last two commentary videos have not gone well technically for me, but I think that by the end of this, you'll find a lot of useful information about how you're being manipulated on YouTube. All right, so the first step is going to be to listen to what's being said and also to watch what's on the screen when things are being said. Pay attention to how you feel. I think that will help you to understand how this level of manipulation works and why it's, we'll say, super dangerous and important to sort of understand.
Sabine Hossenfelder is a part-time science YouTuber, part-time physicist, prolific author, and fabulous dancer.
It's taken me some time because my brain is really small, but now I understand some people can explain it all.
Okay, so what I want you to notice is the framing. That's what we just did. We did some framing. She's a fabulous dancer. Obviously, she's not. It's said in a very flat voice, so you can't really tell. Is he being facetious, right, or not? You can't tell. This is deliberate, by the way. And that's what's important to recognize. This is deliberate. And then he's got this picture of her. And you notice the clip, my brain is really small, right? And so on the one hand, it seems like a neutral framing of who this person is, when in fact, it's not at all. There's nothing neutral going on here. So with that framing in mind, let's see where it sort of goes from.
One thing is sure about Sabina: she is not afraid of controversies. Her rebellious nature often invites them, and it is fair to say she is currently in one. This time, however, the controversy is different.
I don't trust science, and I don't trust scientists.
Sabine, a scientist, is now facing accusations of promoting anti-science narratives wrapped in anti-establishment rhetoric, with some even branding her a hypocrite. In her videos, Dr. Hossenfelder appears as rebellious or even annoyed.
Most of what physicists do in the foundations of physics today is pseudoscience. It's paper production with no scientific merit that teaches us nothing.
Now, I want you to notice what went on there, right? So he states she's got a rebellious nature. Maybe, maybe not. He doesn't prove that. He just puts a book up, says she's got a rebellious nature. Right? And then he starts talking about her latest controversy, as though he mentioned her previous controversies, which, by the way, he did not. Right? A little weird to say your latest controversy when you haven't talked about the previous controversies. Just saying, it's a weird way to talk. And then he puts up this, subversive looking clip from one of her videos, which is clever editing, really. And then he does this thing with this guy laughing, ha ha ha. Right? So it's all defamation by implication. And that's what's being done here, right? He's talking about all these things as though they're bad without establishing that they're bad. Like, what's wrong with rebellion? She's a scientist critiquing science. Okay, but when non-scientists critique science, you just poo-poo them. So what's up with that? Do you ever notice that? You ever notice people go, well, you're on the outside, you can't critique this. And then when somebody on the inside critiques it, they goes, you're a hypocrite. That's pretty convenient. You can avoid all critique doing that. Doesn't matter. You inside, you're a hypocrite. You outside, you don't know what you're talking about. You can't critique me. That's not a bad gig. Also, it's completely intellectually dishonest, just to be clear. Obviously, it's not hypocritical to talk about the failings of the system you're in. Like, that's not hypocritical, right? That's not what hypocrisy means at all. It has nothing to do with the definition of hypocrisy. So that's, that's good to note. And so you can see, right in the beginning, she's making a bunch of claims by implication without any evidence whatsoever, because there is none, by the way. The reason why it doesn't bring the evidence, and this is mostly true of most people, the reason why they don't bring evidence is because there isn't any. It's a good way to know when someone's lying. Did they bring evidence? No. Okay, fair enough. They're probably lying, and move on with your life. It's quicker. It's quicker than trying to redeem whatever point they're making, because that's just not worth it. Even if they're right, it's not worth it. Trust me.
But when I attended her public lecture in Munich, I had a different impression. She was genuinely friendly and modest. So what's going on? In this video, we are going to explore exactly that.
Okay. So because she critiques science, she shouldn't be genuinely friendly? I don't understand the statement here. And again, look at the visuals. There's the word fallacy behind her head. We haven't established any fallacy. We haven't talked about any fallacy or anything like a fallacy or anything that could become a fallacy so far. We haven't mentioned one thing, not one thing at all, anywhere. So why are we doing this? Why this unflattering, cartoonish picture? Right? And he made the earlier critique that, she sounds angry. She's German. Like, seriously, like, I hate to break this to you, but like, have you met a German that didn't sound angry? Because honestly, I haven't. I met a lot of Germans. They all sound a little angry. Like, I don't know what to tell you about that. It's kind of normal. So you can see it's all this implication. Like, oh, she sounds angry. She's German. Like, I don't know. She scowls a lot. Germans scowl a lot. It's true. There are lots of types of people that scowl a lot. Like anybody in England should. Have you seen the weather? It's always, ugh. So like, why is this interesting? Right? But he's using these implications. He's making these soft connections for you so that you'll draw the conclusion that what he's saying is backed up by fact, when it is not one fact. She wrote a book. Okay. She's been accused. Okay. I mean, an accusation, or the fact that somebody's had an accusation made against them is a fact, but an accusation by definition is not a fact. Why is this interesting? It's because I'm just a pragmatic person. I need facts, please. And if you don't provide them, I just get suspicious and ignore you. And I wish I could ignore this video, but man, it just, what a mess. This video is a mess.
In Dr. Hossenfelder's life, the first eye-opening event towards academia appears to have occurred as early as her master's education. Sabine's perception of academia, as she herself put it, was hopelessly naive.
I don't come from an academic background. I come from a family of teachers and accountants and post office workers.
In her master's degree, Sabine worked with Walter Greiner on...
Okay, I'm just going to jump in right here. So I don't know why, after the things he said, he's going back to her, academic career in the beginning of it. Okay, she was hopelessly naive. I'm sorry, but getting involved in anything for the first time means you're hopelessly naive because you haven't done it before. This is the most uninteresting fact that has ever been said on YouTube. I realize it's a common thing that gets said on YouTube. It's also uninteresting. Like, oh, you did something new and you didn't know what you were getting into. That's definitional, but thanks for the update, Captain Obvious. Like, I don't know what to say about this. So it's worth asking yourself, why is this the transition point? You could ask yourself why he didn't start there with the neutral story. He didn't start with the neutral story. He started with this idea that she was somehow involved in a controversy, and it was one of many, even though that didn't happen, by the way. So, and then said, she's being accused of being a hypocrite when all she's doing is critiquing something that she knows well because she's part of it. Is that Is that hypocrisy? Because it's not. So like, I don't. So now we're going to get into something really interesting. Like, pay very close attention to what happens here. This is fascinating.
Black holes. Greener, who recently passed away, was a respectable physicist well known in the community for his series of books on theoretical physics. I myself have used his book, Field Quantization, to learn about quantum field theory, and, I must admit, it is really good. In a 2018 blog post, Sabine...
So, notice what he did here. He said the guy wrote a lot of books. I don't care. This is going to be super relevant in a few minutes. He wrote a lot of books. This guy read one of the books and found it very helpful. Well, that's interesting. Why is he bolstering this guy's reputation with books? Because as we're about to see, there's a little bit more to that story that doesn't make Walter sound all that great. And, quote, his books may or may not be helpful, but are they his?
Ina revealed that her professor, Greener, fired her from her master's project. In a later video, she explains the reason.
The next problem was that the head of the institute made a lot of money selling textbooks. He wrote very little of these textbooks himself. Rather, he gave assignments for parts of the books to students and postdocs, which is why, in case you've ever wondered, these textbooks are so discontinuous and partly repetitive. He expected me to also work for him, to which I said no. I was then ordered into his office, in which he gave me a very angry speech, according to which I wasn't loyal to all the other students who did their part. I told him that I was under no obligation to work for him and didn't care what the rest of the students were thinking. He got angry, I laughed at him, he started shouting that I was fired and physically shoved me out of his tent. I'm not just telling you this because it's entertaining, it was also a rather rude awakening. It made me realize that this institute wasn't about knowledge discovery, it was about money making. And the more I saw of academia, the more I realized it wasn't just this particular institute and this particular professor.
Okay. Well, how interesting. So they're not Walter Griner's books, are they? So maybe he's not this big, important, interesting physics figure after all, because remember, the premise for why he's this great physicist is because he wrote this wonderful book that this particular person who's doing this video found helpful. But now we find out it wasn't his book. He didn't write it. The students are writing the book. So how good is Walter? Oh, he's good at getting students to do his work for him. This is not a plus for Walter. So the idea that Walter's a respected physicist is not established here. But the fact used to back it up is completely demolished by Sabine. Now, to be fair, I will critique her because this idea that, because of this one incident, everywhere I looked, I saw that these institutions were money-making machines. That actually is not a rational, logical way to think about the world. Things that are successful will involve money exchange, because money exchange is how we track success to some extent, automatically. Also, money exchange, for better or for worse, especially in, we'll say, recent times, we'll say maybe post 1500s, has become increasingly used, right, as a societal marker, where it wasn't before. And this is why capitalism became, we'll say, more important over time, right? Because as you flatten the world, as you behead the king, see my history videos with Adam, and things like that, what you're going to find is that in order to track importance, you have to have more things that were not monetary become monetary, right? So when they were building a cathedral, nobody had a cathedral budget. Like, that's not the way that worked. It's not that there was zero budget for the cathedral. The amount of, we'll say, man hours spent on the cathedral was not tracked primarily in dollars. And that's really important to realize, is that large building projects, let's say in the Roman Empire, were not, it's not that the soldiers weren't paid. They were paid, but they were paid regardless of the job they were doing for the most part throughout most of the Roman Empire. And so building a bridge, building a road, fighting a war, there's not much difference there in terms of pay. Right? Now, there's still a difference in terms of glory and clout, right? It's still a social marker. It's not an economic marker tracked by cash. Nowadays, everything's tracked by cash. And so when you have a successful institution, it's going to have more money flowing in and out of it automatically. So her critique is not exactly fair. Now, it may be right that we'll say their focus is more on money than on research. I don't know, because I'm not there. But that would have been a more interesting point to make than it was all about money. That does seem a little over the top. And we'll say unfair to the institutions. But that's as far as I can go with that, because I don't know. I wish he had phrased it differently. That's all. But I mean, I think it's my only critique in this whole video. But let's go on and see what else.
It must have been disappointing to learn that such a respected academician could be so petty. After a string of postdocs requiring moving and living far from her husband, she decided she needed to return to Germany with her children.
I had moved.
Okay, so I want you to notice the subtle change here, right? So instead of addressing the controversy that this guy's a scumbag who did not in fact write those books, but forced his students to do it, which is intellectually dishonest and therefore disqualifies him as a good anything, by the way, he moves to, she must have been disappointed. Shouldn't we all be disappointed that this guy is putting his name on a book that he didn't write? It's pretty disappointing to me. And the books apparently aren't that good because they're repetitive in certain chapters, right? Sabine describes why. Okay. Why isn't this the critique? Because that would be a good critique of this clown who's pretending or was pretending to be, an academic writing books when he wasn't doing that. I don't know. The dishonesty seems more important to me. And the fact that she's disappointed that this guy's basically doing this stuff for money and forcing his students to write his books that he's putting his name on, that seems like the bigger issue than her, quote, disappointment. Like, she's disappointed that the institutions are money-making operations rather than focused on research. Yeah, so am I. Although I'm also angry because they get tax money. That's my money. So why isn't this guy angry? Is it because he's Australian? He sounds Australian. I don't know. There's a lot going on in Australia, by the way. And there's some good people in Australia like Jesse. Jesse's a wonderful person, right? But also, there's a lot of marketing agencies in Australia. It's very strange. They seem to be on social media a lot. And they seem to be getting paid by governments like the United States government. Ask me how I know. They seem to be all over Clubhouse back in the day. Oh, weird. Why are Australians talking about world issues from their little island that they know nothing about, by the way, just randomly in the middle of Clubhouse rooms? How strange. Get on a live stream. Ask me how I know. Go ahead. Ask me how I know they're being paid by the federal government of the United States and the European Union. A little bit of research goes a long way. What are these guys doing over there? It's a good question. Why are there so many marketing companies on this relatively small island? Are they that capitalistic? Because I thought we were the big capitalist country over here in the US. What is this guy's motivation for doing this video? Is he going to make enough money doing this video to make up for his time, energy, and attention for putting all this effort in with all this cool editing? It's cool editing. Looks pretty professionally done. Maybe he did it himself. I have no idea, but did he? What's going on here? It's worth asking the question.
Half around the world, because that's standard for postdocs. It's just expected of you. And at some point, you just accept the constant moving as normal because the only people you know also do it. It's incredibly hostile to personal life, detrimental to mental health, and women suffer from it more because our reproductive reality is that we need to start families.
This
Okay. Well, that's a pretty interesting case. You're surrounded by a bunch of people doing the thing. So you think it's normal because it's become part of your normative order, if we want to use these fancy Vervaeke type terms. And so you don't think of anything about it. But actually, her assessment is correct. It's extremely damaging, especially for women. And it's not good for families, right? You want intimacy crisis? Well, that's part of the intimacy crisis. Like, you put people in a situation where they're moving around a lot and they're not going to form strong ties, not going to have good grounding. They're going to lose contrast for things like sense making, which is what this is all about, restoring sense making. So she doesn't paint this as anyone's fault. She said this happened. It's a very neutral, descriptive statement. It's not an explanation. It's not an excuse. It's not a set of reasoning, right? She's just saying what happened, okay? And how she fell prey to it. She shouldn't seem to be using it as like, the reason I did this is.
constant need to move for jobs and chase grant funding appears to have left her disappointed with academia. But there was something else as well.
Okay. Doing that would leave you disappointed in life. She didn't say she was disappointed in academia. She said she was disappointed with the results of that in her life. This is very clever reframing going on here. And now we've got this weird spinning question mark, as if that thing that she said is not the core issue. There's something else going on here. There's always something else going on in a description or an explanation. Always. Why is this an interesting way to talk about the world? There's something else going on. Sure. Let's see where this goes, though.
She did not understand why otherwise intelligent people were dedicating so much effort to something that, in her view, was clearly not working. Here.
Where was that statement made? It's just something he's saying. And what difference does that make? Maybe it's true. So what? Why is this a ding on her? Like, again, I don't understand. Like, given those conditions, academia or not, having to move around all the time doesn't sound ideal to me. I mean, some people thrive on that, but they're rare. And that's fine. Like, the jobs where you can do that are out there. So what's going on? And why is there a clock with all these dollars flying around? What is being symbolized by this? What's being put into your brain? What signal are you getting?
We are talking about string theory. Massive physics breakthroughs from relativity and quantum mechanics to particle physics eventually ended in 1973 with the completion of the Standard Model. The only obvious thing left was to unify quantum mechanics with gravity. During the 80s and 90s, string theory emerged as a possible theory of everything, capable of unifying all fundamental forces, including gravity.
Where we have vibrating strings moving in 10-dimensional hyperspace.
String theory was hyped both within the physics community and among the general public. Every talented young physics student was expected to join it, and the narrative was such that if you are not doing string theory, you are dumb. However, there was a small but vocal group who was skeptical of this. In 2006, both Lee Simmelin and Peter Woit wrote books criticizing the string theory. Their top criticisms were as follows. The theory lacked any experimental evidence.
Getting this nonsense past peer review was to invent reasons for why this supposed evidence for string theory had not been seen so far, but would show up in the next experiment. It's always the next experiment that'll find.
Secondly, it required artifacts like extra dimension and supersymmetry. Thirdly, there was the sociological problem. As a researcher, if you wanted to get funding, you had to do string theory.
Putting string theory in a
So I want you to notice we've segued straight into string theory. Why? I'm not saying this has nothing to do with Sabine, because it does, but why are we discussing string theory? And then we're very hot on, look at all the things it's going to provide, because we reached the end of something. So we needed something new, obviously, right? We reached the 73, we reached the end of the standard model. Oh no, we've reached the end of the model. Maybe that just means the model's wrong, by the way, but whatever. Or it has a constraint. Like, who cares? And then we get string theory. Let me be very, very clear about this. String theory is garbage, and it always was. And that really should have been obvious to absolutely anyone. Okay? I'll tell you why, in very simply. Okay? String theory is supposed to answer the question of where the Big Bang came from. Okay? Now, the Big Bang theory, that's a theological statement. It's not a scientific thing that scientists ever came up with. That didn't happen, just to let you know. I don't know if it was a monk or a priest or whatever, came up with Big Bang to explain ex nihilo. That's what happened. Okay? This is a fundamentally religious explanation for the beginning of the universe without using Genesis and the creation story. That's all Big Bang is. Okay? So now we need a way to explain that, we'll say scientifically. Okay, well, it turns out that, I don't know if it was Brian Greene or one of the other guys that does the string theory nonsense, found something in late 1800s text mathematically that allowed them to do something clever with the math. And not all math maps to reality at all. In fact, most of it doesn't. It's good to know, right? That allowed them to do something funky in terms that would allow this extra dimensionality to appear. I think it had something to do with either neutrinos or electrons. I don't remember. I looked into this when I was a kid, basically, many decades ago. Right? This is why I'm pissed off about string theory lasting so long. It was obvious BS from the beginning. The problem is that when you open up a new dimension, you don't answer the question of where the dimension you were stuck in comes from. What you do is you have to ask, where did that dimension come from? So you haven't changed the game at all. You've just made a new game, right? You've inserted a new set of questions to answer, which is why it has all of these, things going on. And then you'll notice too, he takes these two technical reasons why this is, we'll say super important or whatever, right? This no experimental evidences, right? In other words, there's no observation. Science is supposed to begin with observation. I know Einstein broke that to some extent, bad on Einstein, but also it's supposed to begin with observations. There's no observation. There shouldn't even be a thought. And if there's no random thought, there shouldn't be a hypothesis because there hasn't been an observation. And if there's no testable hypothesis, it's not a theory. It's not even a hypothesis. Right? If there's no testable observation to be made, we're not in the realm of theory and hypothesis. We're out of the realm of science entirely. And then it requires extra dimension, supersymmetry, a negative cosmological constant, right? It requires all these things. Fair enough. It might be worth asking why there's no negative cosmological constant to begin with, because that means that competing theories require a positive cosmological constant. Where's that coming from? Right, we start to see the cracks in science right here. And then there's a sociological problem. What does that even mean? What do you mean a sociological problem around string theory? It's not a sociological theory. Why would there be a sociological problem? Right? And then he appeals to this idea that you can't get funded unless you're into string theory. Okay, that sounds like a fundamentally governmental problem, right? Or a political problem. Right, that creates an issue within science, which is not a sociological problem. Oh, if you want funding, you have to be doing string theory. Well, A, your funding apparatus is broken, and B, you don't even have a theory. So you broke your science and therefore your funding apparatus. I'm shocked. I'm utterly shocked. Who could have seen that come? Of course you did. But like, why is this? Why is this like? Why is this important? Because we still haven't got. We just segued from there's something else going on with Sabine. There's something else going on, and all about string theory. And to be fair, he's gonna wrap it together, but like it doesn't look good for string theory so far. So like, if somebody has a problem with string theory, I'm kind of on their side automatically.
Grant proposal became a way to get your research funded. I myself wrote my PhD thesis on how to test those large extra dimensions of string theory at the LHC.
This heated debate of 2006 between advocates and critics of string theory is referred to as the String Wars. Around this time, Sabine began her blogging journey, aligning herself with the critics of string theory. The reaction from string theorists was, to put it mildly, unprofessional.
I don't think anyone would call Lee Smolin a crackpot.
You want to take a vote on that?
It might be fair to say.
So far, we basically pointed out with evidence that the string theorists are uncharitable and kind of jerky, right? Okay. And they're unprofessional, right? And they're kind of jerks. Okay. So Sabine is not siding with the jerks. Again, she's didn't side with the jerk Walter. She's not siding with the jerks that believe in string theory. Weird. It looks like she's the good guy. I don't understand what the problem is here. Like, seriously. But if you've gotten the feeling that she's the bad person in this equation somehow, because there was fallacy behind her angry face, which was cartoonized just to soften the effect. Like, this is all high-level manipulation. Like, these videos are very dangerous. This is Australia. Weird place.
That Sabine's side emerged victorious in the string war. The aftermath of this loss was that string theory faced increased scrutiny from both the physics community and the general public. Even some senior string theorists acknowledged that the ultimate goal of string theory remains unfulfilled.
So I can tell you with certainty, string theory with a capital S, the precise mathematical structure, which, as I said, mathematicians win prizes for. No, incidentally, no physicist has ever won a big prize for string theory. I can tell you with absolute certainty that it is not the real world that we live in. So what do we make out of that? I don't know. We need to expand the theory. We need to generalize it a little bit. And in fact, I can say a little more, that no known version of it, no precise known version of it exists in de Sitter space. We live in de Sitter space.
Sabine and her gang.
Okay. There's Susskind saying theory doesn't work, doesn't map to reality, it's pure mathematics, all of which is fine. Like, most math does not map to reality. I hate to break it. It just doesn't. It never has. Anybody who studies this knows. I will also note one other important thing in case you don't know this. Mathematicians use different symbols for the same sorts of mathematical functions than physicists use. This is a well-known problem, if you will, of disunity or whatever. I don't think it's a problem. I don't care. It's pointless nonsense as near as I can tell. Who cares, right? But I don't know why Sabine's side one is a bad thing. I don't understand why this is even being talked about. Where is her fallacy? I don't understand this. So far, she looks like a hero to me. But there's Susskind himself saying this doesn't map to anything that affects our real world. And the only people who have gotten prizes for it have been mathematicians. Why are mathematicians getting Nobel Prizes for things that don't map to the world that affects us? That might be a really good question. And I'm not saying it's a bad thing. I'm just saying, like, it's a worthy question. I don't know what questions he's asking in this video, but that question seems a bit more interesting, at least to me.
Sabine goes so far as to declare string theory a dead field.
Putting string theory in a grant proposal became a way to get your research funded. I myself wrote my PhD thesis on how to test those large extra dimensions of string theory at the LHC. The result of the string wars and the following failure of the LHC to see even a shred of evidence in support of it was that the branch of string theory, which contained the last remains of the original idea to find the theory of everything, basically died off.
In my view,
Okay. Notice he's done 2 clips of her saying she did her PhD thesis within string theory. This subconsciously backs up this hypocrisy nonsense that I already knocked out earlier. So you're hearing what you think you can interpret as hypocrisy. Now, sometimes in life, you learn things. And then you go, you know what? I was wrong before. That's not hypocritical. That's learning. That's called everybody does that all the time. Right? Now, there's certain people that resist that later in life. But when you're a child, that happens all the time. That's not hypocrisy. It's not what it's called. Don't use the word hypocrisy for that. You'll be wrong. So what's going on here? Like, so far, he has not made this case. There's this big question of something else going on. There's always something else going on. I mean, there's always a war somewhere in the world. Why? What does this have to do with fallacies? We're 8 minutes in. I haven't heard a single bad thing about Sabine. Not one. Where is this?
the real damage is that young people are no longer drawn to string theory. This, eventually, will likely lead to its end. Back to Sabine, she started an...
Okay, so you notice now he says, in my opinion. He doesn't talk about her at all. He says, oh, fewer people will be interested in string theory. String theory doesn't correlate to our reality. Why would they be interested? Why would anybody? Why was anybody ever interested in it? That's a better question. It seems to be a dead end because we can't find experimental evidence for it. Why was it ever even considered a part of science? That's a better question. So why is people not pursuing something as young people that seems to not correlate with anything in reality a bad thing? And who is this guy with this crappy opinion? Because it's the dumbest opinion I've ever heard. Oh, young people won't be drawn to this theory that has no experimental evidence for it. Okay. Good news. But cake? I don't understand. But you hear how he couched it. Like, in my opinion, we're hurting young people somehow. How did young people even get involved in this? Why would they be drawn to string theory? Why should they? You didn't make a positive case for string theory. You've only actually made a negative case for string theory. But you say somehow young people won't be drawn to it. Well, who's that hurting? It sounds like they won't be wasting their time with a garbage theory that isn't even a theory and doesn't work. This is good news, not bad news. I don't, like, why is he couching it in the opposite terms? These are questions worth asking. This is hard stuff to spot, but this is the stuff you have to spot if you're going to be watching videos on the freaking YouTube, because these are the games these people are playing. This, to me, looks highly produced. It looks like it has a very clear propagandistic, if you will, agenda to it. But, I mean, it's full of lies so far. I mean, this guy hasn't really said anything except he's lying in the contrast between the audio and the video. And there's going to be more of that. It's a mess.
An interesting initiative called Talk to a Scientist, where for a fee of $50, people could ask anything about physics. Eventually, Dr. Sabine Hossenfelder shifted from blogging to YouTube, first with her dance videos and then with science content. Her videos, sometimes provocative, gradually picked attention and propelled her to fame. She's now a professional YouTuber with a team behind her, putting out videos almost every day. Let's first discuss the good sides of her videos. Sabine Hossenfelder is an excellent educator when it comes to explaining well-understood subjects that have broad consensus.
Okay, so all of this, well, she started blogging and taking money for answering science questions, which was very innovative. That's not all that new. I mean, maybe directly taking money is new, but like Bill Nye the Science Guy got paid for answering science questions too. Like, I don't understand. And then she transitioned into YouTube. Okay, we're watching YouTube. What? Who cares? And then he says, she's an excellent educator. Okay, what would it take to be an excellent educator? She's very good at explaining well understood concepts with large consensus. I don't think that meets the definition of an excellent educator. And so there's this cognitive dissonance that gets set up by framing things that way. And this is all, man, this is a framing nightmare of manipulation. You're just being manipulated left, right, and center in this whole video with framing. Left, right, and center, because postmodernism is a real problem. And they're using it to manipulate you. Who in this case? I don't know. I don't care. Australia gets a lot of money from the federal government in the United States, though. That's a little weird. What are these marketing companies doing? Why are these people from Australia on social media all day? I don't know. Worthy questions to ask, though. Highly produced. Looks like you got a team behind you doing this video, buddy. But you just said Sabine has a team behind her. What am I supposed to make of that? Most people have a team behind them. Even I have a tiny team behind me. Who cares? Producing videos takes a team. Thanks, genius. Great update, Captain Obvious. Why is this interesting information that I need to know about this alleged fallacy? Where is this fallacy? Where are the negative statements so far? Again, she put a cape on this woman. Fantastic, right? And you notice when they were flashing her videos, she's got this angry face and the dancing's overlaid on top. This is all manipulation, right? This is all flat out manipulation. I'm not a fan, not a fan.
She criticizes oversimplified physics phenomena that other physics channels do not care to explain extensively. Many of her criticisms regarding the current status of academia are totally valid, and people in academia resonate with them. She often criticizes that no physics achievements have been made in the last 40 years. At least in the foundations of physics, it is not just an opinion. It is a fact. It is also quite satisfying to see her stand up against the toxic behavior exhibited by some string theorists. I mean, just pause and see this bizarre Twitter thread of a string theorist called Strinking 42069.
Okay, so you notice he's saying, oh, she's standing up against the toxic behavior, and then showing a picture of her looking mean up at the camera from down below, like she's challenging something. It's just a very negative image on top of very positive statements about the fact that she's right about this science and the scam going on in science right now. Oh, good. And a lot of people agree with her. Oh, this is fantastic. So where's the negative? But he's showing negative images to you while he's giving you the good, according to him. Like he put the good on the screen, not me. So what's going on here?
However, recently, she has gotten into arguments with Professor Dave for her so-called anti-science videos.
This. Thumbnails that say, I don't trust scientists. That's the problem with Sabine. Incredibly unprofessional, damaging clickbait thumbnails like this. And statements like this.
Most of academic research that your taxes pay for is almost certainly bullshit.
That's a ridiculous and totally indefensible statement that fuels...
Okay, I looked into Professor Dave. He's a jerk. He's also wrong. It's not a ridiculous statement. It's totally defensible, and she did defend it. So that's a lie. So he's a liar. See how easy that is? It's easy to spot liars. Really easy. Factual information, 0%. Excellent. You're a liar. Done. Okay. You notice, too, we went from the good to this Sabine versus, right? Versus someone else. Where's the bad? Because so far, I haven't seen any bad, except from Professor Dave. He's dressed like a clown. Do you know why someone's dressed like a clown? It's because they're a clown. I don't trust scientists. Why would you? Why should she trust scientists? They betrayed her. I mean, it makes sense to me that she doesn't trust scientists. I don't trust the scientists either. So far, the only case that's been made is for everybody not to trust the scientists. I mean, they're putting their names on books they're not writing. They're getting money for a theory that doesn't help anybody in the real world where they live. Why would you trust these people? Just tell me why. Where's the bad? Started with the good. We went to this versus framework. Where are we going next?
The kind of science deniers Professor Dave is talking about include flat earthers, anti-vaxxers, and climate change deniers.
I personally began to notice this when I observed that a fair amount of science deniers would commonly reference her. That's a red flag.
Okay. You know who else drank water? Right. This is a ridiculous set of arguments. Okay. The fact that people on the fringe agree with somebody does not make that person fringe. That is not a red flag. Okay. I know who follows Dave too. And guess what? Some of them don't have great, we'll say reputations. In fact, they all also follow Sabine. So his argument doesn't work because if you apply it to him, he's just as bad, if not worse. Now, of course, he won't tell you that part. He'll just leave that out conveniently. But if you look, right, he knows you won't look. The person doing this video knows you won't look. It's a very common trick. Like, oh, they have bad people following them on YouTube or on Instagram or on Facebook. It's like, yeah, so do you. Like, why is this a valid critique? It's not a valid critique. It's a statement of observation of fact in the world that's fairly universal. It's not 100% universal, but it's fairly universal. Well, you have a bad person in your audience or a bad number of people in your audience. Are all audiences perfect and good? What's the claim? This is all implication, right? This is all guilt by association. This is garbage nonsense. When you hear these sorts of attacks, you should immediately stop listening to these people because they're dangerous and they're using an agenda and they're automatically already lying to you. It's not pretty.
Can cause significant harm on both individual and societal levels as they vote and influence decisions.
Did you see that? He flashes a picture of democracy, uses the word harm, and then says individuals, and says it doesn't just affect the individual, it affects the institutions and the governments and like all of these implications. There's voting. Okay, no voting works like that, by the way. But you in your head, you're thinking, oh, voting and democracy, this is an attack. It's a harmful attack on democracy. See what he did there with the video and the wording and how it goes together? And you don't even notice it. It soaks right into your head because you're so used to fast cuts in YouTube videos, right? You just get sucked right in. This is extremely bad. People go, we can't have censorship on the... I'm like, really? You need to censor this stuff. No one should be allowed to publish stuff like this on the internet. Period. End of statement. This is manipulation, mass manipulation, whether it's done by a single person or a group of persons, whether they're being paid by some organization somewhere in the EU or in the United States, or maybe even in Australia, although I doubt that there's much money in Australia, to do this video. That is unacceptable. This sort of nonsense should not be permitted in any kind of a society because we won't have a society if we try to go down this road. You want culture war? There's your culture war.
I mean, just look at anti-vaccine movements during the pandemic. Others on Reddit.
What an interesting thing to list. Just look at anti-vaccine movements. What about them? I don't know. I was telling people early on, the problem with this fake news virus scam and their alleged vaccine, that is definitely not a vaccine because it doesn't actually match any of the descriptions or explanations or mechanisms of action of any previous thing we've called a vaccine. It's probably going to lead people to feel like the 90s anti-vax movement was totally justified. And that definitely happened. Whose fault is that? It's the fault of people who do videos like this. Because again, this is more, implication. It's all this implication of something bad that she's done. How are we talking about democracy and anti-vax movements with respect to string theory and the word fallacy, which Sabine, so far, we're 10 minutes in. We're like halfway through this video almost. Not one fallacy has been brought up. What is going on? Look at the title of the video. Where is this imaginary fallacy? Let's find out, because there's something coming.
Share similar concerns. But why do science deniers follow her videos? Professor Dave explains the reason as follows.
As it turns out, it is a firm anti-establishment sentiment, and in particular anti-academia sentiment, which, as any viewer of my debunks will recall, I consistently describe as the single characteristic that unites all science. To paint with such a broad brush and brand the entirety of academia this way is just dishonest, tasteless, and quite frankly amounts to nothing but sour grapes.
Some think
Okay. No evidence. He just said, which is a personal opinion, it's dishonest, distasteful, etc., etc. I don't care about Professor Dave's opinion. First of all, he's kind of obnoxious and annoying. It's a good sign to stay away from somebody. He dresses down on video to seem more like an everyman. He's Professor Dave, Dude, I know what you're up to. I'm not a fan. I don't like it. I see what you're doing. Okay. That did not explain what he said it explained. He said this explains why people follow her. That didn't explain why people follow her. That didn't happen, just to let you know. It didn't even happen. She's making a claim about something that didn't happen. That did not explain why people follow her. Yeah, she paints academia with a, quote, broad brush. What is she supposed to do? Call them all out individually? Oh, because wait a minute. She did that. She called out her former professor individually as an example. So that wasn't painting as a broad brush. So while you do paint as a broad brush because it's an institution, you can't talk about an institution and not paint with a broad brush at the same time. That's not possible. If she's wrong, show the data. That's all. Just show the data. Most academia is not tied up in money. Okay, just show me some data. Or you're lying. I don't know which. No, oh no, wait. Sorry. I do, because you can't show me any data. You know why I know you can't? Because I looked, and I'm a data scientist. Professor Dave, right? Oops. I looked. The correlation between academia putting out good research and academia getting a bunch of money and not putting out good research definitely exists. That's weird. I'm not the only one that noticed this, by the way, but I did do my own research because I don't trust anybody, unfortunately. And I can do my own research. Not that hard. For me, maybe hard for you. Fair enough. Maybe you shouldn't do that. You should find some leader to follow on that issue. If you can't do the work, it's no shame, no problem, right? So I've done this research. I've looked into this. Other people have looked into this. There's definitely a correlation between the quality of the research and how much money's gone in. That's a negative correlation. The more money you add to academia, the worse it gets. This correlation is weird, right? Because it holds in lower education, not just higher education. The more money you put into the grammar school and middle school and high school, the worse results you get, right? That's why we abolished the Department of Education, because that correlation exists. And it seems to be a causation, right? When you let greedy people into a thing by adding enough money to incentivize them, they destroy it and corrupt it. Yeah, that's probably true of all institutions. I'm painting institutions with a broad brush because you can't not paint an institution with a broad brush, because if you paint it with a tiny brush, you're not talking about an institution anymore. Do you see the verbal tricks they're using? Oh, well, an institution isn't a homogeneous, perfect thing. Thanks. Nothing else is either. Why are we having these bizarre discussions? What is this image? Why is somebody tied up? What is going on? Why are we showing a tied up person? Let's find out, shall we?
That Sabine's comment on academia might be too harsh, and the situation outside academia is not good either. Others complain that she has recently been publishing too many unpolished, poorly researched videos and is thus falling into the classic social media victim.
Oh, really? Oh, other people. So not you. So you're not making any accusations against her so far. You're just relying on other people's accusations, except for your little opinion about the harming of the children because they won't get involved in string theory, which doesn't correspond to reality anyway. That's your only opinion so far. It's everybody else is doing all this horrible, oh, look, she's a social media victim. Right, okay. Can't be a victim of social media. I hate to break it to you. Social media is not an agent in the world. It doesn't create victims. It doesn't do harm to people as an agent in the world. The tools that we refer to as social media can be used to harm people for sure, but it does not victimize because there's no social media it. There's no agency in social media. So this way of talking about the world is extremely damaging and materialistic. Like there's some kind of social media psychic space dragon. Buy a psychic space dragon. They're really cool, right? And it's making victims because it's doing things to people, and they were good before, but it's a social media that did the bad thing to them. So now you don't have to call them a bad person. Isn't that handy? It's really handy. It's all nonsense and garbage, but it's very.
In my opinion, the situation worsens when she talks on a topic where people lack consensus and puts her views as the only truly good one.
She talks on it. How do you determine what views have consensus? Why is he putting up another relatively angry face on her and saying it worsens? Like, do you notice we went from the good to the verses to the worsens? Did you notice that progression on the screen? Because that happened. What didn't happen is we didn't transition from the good to the bad. But we've been saying bad things the whole time. We haven't said one good thing, right? But we've just made that implication in your mind by putting things on the screen. I mean, so far, she's trying to destroy democracy, and she might as well be an anti-vaxxer. We saw the results of that. Recently, this anti-vax. What results? The positive ones? Because there weren't any negative ones, buddy. I don't know what to tell you. Oh. Vaccine seems to be a common theme among the Australians in the marketing companies on Clubhouse. Ask me how I know. Weird. Very strange. Why would you bring it up here?
For example, consider her recently published videos on the black hole information paradox, where she complains that the problem is not worth researching. In 1975, Hawking showed that in the context of black holes, combining general relativity with quantum mechanics leads to information loss. This is a paradox, as information preservation is a fundamental principle in physics. But this is not necessarily bad news.
Sabine's correct. It's not actually a paradox because there's no expectation that classical physics and quantum mechanics can be combined in that way. Technically incorrect, just to let you know. It's a false statement. It's a flat out false statement. And I'll also point out that whether or not physicists, quote, love paradoxes, paradox is a sign that your theory or hypothesis is limited and it has reached its constraints, or that it's wrong. That's all it is by definition. There's no other possible definition, by the way. And you're going to see that, interestingly, too. You're not going to notice it because he's not going to frame it that way, but that's actually what's being said.
Paradoxes coming from the conflict of established principles are the major source of scientific progress. The ultraviolet catastrophe, for example, led to the development of quantum mechanics, while the paradox surrounding the speed of light in the ether paved the way for relativity. In fact, Hawking's information paradox is the...
So what were the paradoxes? The ultraviolet catastrophe? How is that a paradox? Did he explain that? No, he didn't. claim this other thing was a paradox. It's not, by the way. This is just made up. This is made up nonsense. Just to let you know. I've talked to physicists about both these things. No. The way he's framing this is just ridiculous and insane. Okay. The fact that an observation doesn't match a mathematical prediction on the math is not considered a paradox by physicists. They may use the term paradox because they're a little English retarded, quite honestly. I mean, seriously. Sorry, I know a lot of physicists, they really kind of are sometimes. And they like to be clever and sound hip. And they often just abuse the language. See, Eric Weinstein abused the language all the time to sound a little more hip. I'm fair enough. Like, I'm not, but I'm saying these aren't paradoxes. When the math and the prediction doesn't match the observation, that's not a paradox, right? It's just they're wrong. That's what that means. Oh, our math is wrong. Right. Your math is, remember I said mathematics usually doesn't map to the right. The fact that mathematics doesn't map to the real world is not a paradox. It's expected. That's kind of the opposite of a paradox to some extent. Just want to make that clear. I want to make that abundantly clear. It's important. It's actually important.
The biggest hint we have in solving the problem of quantum gravity. There are multiple approaches, no consensus, and the problem remains wide open. Yet, Sabine thinks the problem is uninteresting.
If we did, it wouldn't matter because it won't be useful for anything. Really, the reason I'm telling you about this is that I used to think this was interesting because solving this problem was supposed to teach us.
Okay, so remember earlier when Susskind said string theory doesn't map to anything that we care, right? Guess what else is true? Whether information is preserved at the other side of a black hole event horizon is also irrelevant to any possible interaction of your life ever. For real. It's not going to change anything if it's true, and it's not going to change anything if it's false. The fact that there's multiple approaches to a problem is called Tuesday. We already knew this. Problems have multiple approaches. Thanks for the update, Captain. Obvious. Right? Making universal statements, things that are absolutely 1000% true, but totally irrelevant, is what this video is all about. And this is a common tactic on the internet. People will just say something that's completely true as though it's interesting. It's like, well, who cares? It's like the sun rose in the east this morning. Okay, where is this fallacy that we've been promised here? What is the title of this video? Where is the fallacy of Sabine Hossenfelder? Where is it? So far, we've done all of this guilt by association, guilt by implication, and a bunch of clever editing. Was that done by a team? Clever editing. And all of this, well, this person says this bad thing about her, and that person says that bad thing about her. And some of these guys are bad actors. Well, that's a weird correlation that a bunch of bad actors on the internet and bad actors in physics made bad statements. So what are the odds? 100%. That's what the odds, they're 100%. Why is this interesting?
Even her own viewers are highly skeptical of this. One viewer commented that he is dubious of statements declaring that we'll never know the answer to a given question, or that such an answer would never be useful for anything.
All right, this is what I call a fair but invalid and irrelevant critique. Sure, you can't make universalist statements about the future state of the universe. Thanks. Already knew that. For the purposes of communicating with real humans in the real world who are real, really, saying we'll never know or that it will never solve anything is probably more useful. If you doubt this, you should see my video on metaphorical versus literal truth. I know it's an older video, but my older videos are very good, I assure you. They may not be as well produced, we'll say, or well edited, but there's some gems in there for sure. And I think this is, speaking a little bit metaphorically or hyperbolically is not a bad thing. Obviously, I use hyperbole all the time. It's really helpful when you're talking to normal people and not talking to pedantic, autistic psychopaths, right? Sometimes details matter. Most of the time they don't. Sometimes precision and accuracy matters, like when you're actually doing science. But when you're talking about science, being perfectly accurate is impossible. That's why you can't paint an institution with a small brush. You have to paint an institution with a large brush because you can't get into the details. And saying they're all like that is close enough to find and fix and recognize a problem. And saying, oh, well, this professor's bad and that professor's bad, it's going to take you forever to fire all the bad professors in academia when most of them appear to have a problem around making money versus doing good research, for example. Just a math problem, which is odd that you'd think they'd understand. Oh, they understand the math problem. They just like to hide under this ridiculous semantical breakdown of, well, you're not being accurate and precise in the way that I like. That's nonsense. Don't listen to people that do that. They're not super helpful. Notice the difference when accuracy and precision matters and when it doesn't. If you're using a term and you don't have a definition, that's a problem. If you're trying to make a point and you can't explain your point, you might be right, but the fact you can't explain it means you shouldn't be talking about it, whether you're right or not. Because rightness is not a free card to spew your ideas all over the place. And that's the problem. And so a little discernment is just required here. And being dubious of the statement is fine, but like, what are we talking about here? She didn't say nobody should ever work on this because, or nobody should get any funding because of this. Maybe that's an implication. And I'm okay with that implication because she's still right about the fact that it isn't ever going to be useful for anything. It's almost certainly never going to be able to be useful for anything other than curiosity. And curiosity killed the cat, so don't be a cat.
The other viewer was surprised that how a physicist couldn't care what would happen at the black hole. After these criticisms, Sabine uploaded another video clarifying the situation.
It's not maths. Unfortunately, we can't make the measurement. It's because the radiation that comes out of the black holes that we know to exist is far too weak. Even if we could measure it, it'd take 10 to the 100 years or so until they've radiated away. Not 10 to 100 years, 10 to the power of 100.
Basically, her argument is that observing Hawking radiation is impossible in the near future. But that is just bad science.
No, that's good science, and her statement is true. And you'll notice he didn't refute her statement. Her statement was, we can't measure this because of the radiation. She's not the only one who said this. Like, this is well known in physics. You're not critiquing her. You're critiquing a bunch of people who've written papers about this. Yeah, it might be possible in theory for us to measure this, but even if it were possible, we can't do it now. And we don't know that it's possible, by the way. We're just theorizing that it's possible because, we've done a bunch of cool things like been able to measure gravity waves, which nobody thought was going to be possible because it took 40 years or something like that to get the gravity wave measurement equipment up to spec. And then, yeah, eventually we were able to do it. But I think we went 10 years running on the version 2 or maybe version 3 of the sensor before we could even do it. And what did gravity waves tell us about the world? I don't know. It didn't stop the war in Ukraine or the fake news virus scam. I don't know what good this stuff is.
Mark once told Boltzmann that atoms would never be observed and that he should give up on atoms. Yet atoms have become a cornerstone of modern science. Indeed, direct observation of Hawking radiation from massive black holes is unlikely. Hawking himself recognized this and proposed.
Okie dokie. So she was right. But in the middle of saying she was right, he goes off on this tangent about one scientist to another who should stop dealing with atoms. he didn't, and he didn't make any progress. So it looks like Boltzmann was right. I don't know what else to say. Like, he's saying this like it's a bad thing, and it wasn't. It was correct. So the fact that somebody else was able to use atoms later on, after he was dead, is really not a good case for her statement, which is still valid and correct. So what are we doing? Where's her fallacy?
Proposed that tiny black holes formed in the early universe could produce detectable effects. In fact, these primordial black holes have been suggested as potential dark matter candidates and, who knows, might even be detected in the future. In any case, the real issue isn't whether Hawking radiation will be measured. It's her outright claim that it will never be measured. For a very bad reason, she dismisses the biggest clue we have towards solving quantum gravity.
Do black holes destroy information? This
Wait a minute. How did we get to quantum gravity? When was that brought up? Why did we just mention quantum gravity? And why would quantum gravity play into black hole information law? Are we going to answer these questions? Where the hell's the fallacy?
was supposedly a huge mystery that physicists wanted to solve to understand the universe with big implications and so on. Or so popular science writers wanted you to think. And then the big mystery just fizzled away. Whatever happened?
It didn't fizzle away. What happened is that even after she left the field is highly active, with significant breakthroughs occurring in recent years. Her favoured approach, that a back reaction at the black hole horizon could resolve the problem, has since been shown to be mathematically incorrect.
Okay. Where is the progress in the field? So you showed one paper that didn't talk about black hole information loss at all. Where is the He didn't mention it. He just said it existed. He pointed to it again without evidence. All of this is without evidence. Did you notice that the whole video is without evidence? So now we're going to get into a very controversial topic indeed, which, you know, I think I'll just Mott and Bailey. I'll go back. We'll go through this because this is going to get really interesting really fast because I'm going to make some interesting claims.
Sabine is often accused of committing the Mott and Bailey fallacy in her arguments.
Okay. First of all, I want to just point something out. From my research and from what I've always understood, there's no such thing as the Mott and Bailey fallacy. There is a type of argumentation known as the Mott and Bailey argument, where you make one outrageous statement and then you retreat to a more defensible position. Now, this can be done in a number of ways. I don't think it's a fallacy, okay? Unless you can prove that the statement, the Bailey, is false, which usually they can't. Just noting what usually happens. It's observational at this point, okay? Also, a lot of what people call Mott and Bailey is not Mott and Bailey. What's happening is somebody's confusing the general for the specific, or they're saying, they're deliberately confusing it, right? They're saying, well, you're painting all institutions with a broad brush, right? Therefore, your Bailey is false because there's a Mott where that's not true. Oh, wait a minute. That's not the way most people use Mott and Bailey. No, it isn't. But guess what? It's the same thing. It's the same thing. It's also a false statement. She did prove that this guy was just in it for the money because he's just writing books. And they weren't even his books. He was enslaving his students to write his books. So the Mott and the Bailey remain proven in that case. Now you'll notice too, he says that other people accuse her of the Mott and Bailey fallacy. And he gives you this nice, pretty picture of a Mott and Bailey. Isn't that pretty? Isn't that nice of him? Is he going to give us an example of her doing the Mott and Bailey fallacy? What's going on? I don't think it's a fallacy. When I grew up, when I learned this stuff, that was not called a fallacy. That's not what it was referred to as, because a fallacy is basically a false statement. Okay, Mott and Bailey is a method of argumentation and not a statement. Ah, that's why I'm saying there's no such thing as the Motte-Bailey fallacy. Well, let's see where he goes with what fallacies, because so far I haven't heard fallacy. I've just heard a bunch of accusations, right? And there aren't his accusations because he's a good dude, just, doing a YouTube video, no agenda whatsoever, right? Right? Clearly.
In this fallacy, one makes a controversial but bold position called Bailey. But, when challenged, they retreat to a more defensible but less ambitious position, Mott.
All right. Look at the example he's using. Now, notice he's describing the Motte-Bailey fallacy. The example is in video on the screen. Okay? I've never heard anybody say homogeneous society, preserve Western civilization, stop Western genocide, and then retreat to we only want to keep out illegal immigrants. But interestingly, I have heard that the other way around. Weird. So what you're saying, Mark, is that people who have made the claim that they want to keep out illegal immigrants have been accused of wanting a homogeneous society to preserve Western civilization and stop white genocide. Why, yes, I've heard it exactly backwards from how he's displaying it on the screen. Many, many times. I can show you examples on Twitter if you want. How weird. But he's got it swapped from what I've heard in the real world. How interesting. But it's on the screen and he didn't say it. Oh, how incredibly manipulative. Fascinating.
This tactic can mislead audiences, remove trust, and confuse the speaker's true position.
Yeah, it can. I would argue again, it is a tactic or a type of argumentation. And as such, it is a tactic. A fallacy is not a tactic. Ever. Sorry, it's not. You're misusing the English language pretty severely at that point, and I object.
An example of this fallacy looks like this. Suppose a speaker claims, the government should ban all fast food restaurants because they are causing a public health crisis. This is Bailey. When challenged, they retreat to a more reasonable and defensible position, Motte, saying, we should implement stricter regulations on the food industry. Clearly, this creates lots of confusion on the speaker's true position.
Have you ever heard anybody make that argument? I haven't. Not once. Not once. The only people that talk about banning fast food restaurants are on the left, by the way, which is a little weird. Saying it's a little strange. It's a little strange. He calls it Motte. I don't know why. Australians are weird sometimes. So in the last screen, he gave us an example, a different example on the screen, and didn't read it out. On this screen, he's giving us an example that is one I've never heard again. Two examples I've never heard, or at least one I've never heard in that way, totally reversed. And then this one, totally reversed. Totally reversed. I wonder if that's important. Anyway, so then he gives us this one that I've never heard. Right? And so if this is such a common problem, and you can convince me that Motte-Bailey's used all the time, that's not hard. Why don't you just give me an actual example instead of making one up? Well, that's interesting. Why would you make up an example of something that's common on the internet, as you claim? What would be the motivation behind doing that? I agree that it's common. Why not just use a real one instead of one I've never even heard of once? And why is it important that this erodes trust and hides the true position? The speaker's true position might be hidden. Where is her fallacy? Are you saying she's using a Motte-Bailey argument? I mean, obviously that's going to be the claim. But why are we speaking in such weird generalities all of a sudden, but using false examples or reverse examples? And why did we put words on the screen and then say something unrelated to the words because it was abstract and generic? It was, Motte-Bailey fallacy is, and you're putting one on the screen. What does that do to you mentally? How does that enchant you? It's a good question. And this time, just to back up the text on the screen, we are reading it out. And what does that do to your brain and your memory from the previous example? We'll say unconsciously. That's right, folks. We're using unconscious or subconscious manipulation or subliminal advertising. I have a couple books on that, or I read a couple books on it. I don't have them anymore. They got stolen, right? From the 60s and 70s, I think, right? So this is probably follow on for Bernays. I don't know. I was a kid back then. I didn't know who Bernays was. Or Ellul or something, right? Talking about the advertising tactics. Well, this is standard advertising tactics right here. This whole video is just one big standard subliminal advertising tactics out of the book, or one of the books about subliminal advertising that came out in the 60s and 70s. And there were probably books before that. That's what this is. This is all PSYOP, the whole thing, start to finish. There's nothing in this video that isn't carefully planned to PSYOP you. In other words, everything in this video is structured in a way to lie to you. And I think I've demonstrated that, pretty well so far. Hopefully you're starting to see it. So we're 16 minutes in on a 21-minute video. We might finish it this week. Who knows?
In the case of the black hole paradox, Bailey is the sweeping statement that black hole information loss is a fake unsolvable problem. However, when pressed on this, she retreats to the Mott, arguing, oh, using this specific method, it is impossible to detect Hawking radiation so that the problem will always remain unsolved.
So what you need to know here is that he added the word fake into what she had said, right? What was actually on the screen. He just added the word fake. He slipped it right in there. I didn't notice that the first 2 times I watched this video, by the way. This stuff is hard. This is really hard. I'm not claiming it's easy, and I'm not claiming you can do it. I'm just saying, gotta be careful what you absorb on the internet, right? The fact that there's only one proposed method for doing a thing, and the fact that that method cannot work, is a reasonable enough set of data to make the statement that it's unsolvable. Because technically, that's true at the moment. Until a method of measurement that is feasible arises, then the problem is unsolvable. In other words, this is a trick of compressing time. Oh, you can't say it will never be solved. Okay. Maybe slightly hyperbolic generalization. Also, it's not solvable right now. Right? Because I could always make the argument that there are no unsolvable problems, and there are no problems that exist because they'll all eventually be solved. This is a nonsense, foolish way to talk about the world, but that's the way they're talking about the world in this video. Okay? It's not an unreasonable way to speak in the world to normal humans to say this is unsolvable when we have no reasonable expectation of being able to solve it anytime soon. It's very common parlance. Right? We do it all the time. It's a shortcut of language. He's being persnickety, right? He's being pedantic. He's using, accuracy and precision at the scientific level and applying it to casual conversation. That's inappropriate and it's manipulative, and I'm not a fan.
Sabine commits these kinds of fallacies also in her critiques of string theory and fundamental physics. Sabine has been exposed multiple times within the physics community. She published a video based on the paper by Roy Kerr that Roger Penrose's Nobel Prize-winning calculations are mathematically wrong.
Penrose's proof draws wrong conclusions from this affine parameter. If the affine parameter ends, that doesn't mean that the curves end at any finite time, because those are 2 different things.
That Roger Penrose's Nobel Prize-winning calculations are mathematically wrong. Penrose later refuted this claim.
That's highly misleading.
This part is highly misleading.
I mean, a null geodesic, if its affine parameter stops, it stops. There is no way of continuing a null geodesic and having its affine parameter stopping and then something starting up. I mean, it doesn't make sense. So if you use ordinary time, it doesn't do any good to you at all, because it becomes zero when you don't want it to be zero. Whereas the affine parameter remains finite.
He didn't refute what she said, right? He just said there's no reason to believe that this one thing ends and therefore this other thing ends. Like, well, okay, there's no reason to believe that they're not linked. But there is a reason to believe they're not linked, because they're not linked, for one thing. We already actually are aware of this, incidentally, because they don't actually correlate in the way that he suggests. Just saying, math is wrong, for sure, right? There's no evidence that points to his math being correct, because it doesn't actually correlate. And what he basically is saying there, and it's all caught up, which is another problem, right? He's just using, picking parts of what Penrose is saying. Penrose is not refuting anything that Sabine's saying. He's basically saying that, oh, the critique is wrong because there's no reason for us to believe that these two things aren't perfectly correlated in all aspects. There's plenty of reason to believe that, however, and unless you have some evidence, the fact that you put it on pen and paper, much like they did with string theory, that is also wrong in an exact same way, according to Susskind, doesn't mean anything. It just means you did some math that you can't prove. Right. Where is this fallacy? Why is Penrose, I understand why Penrose is defending his idea, because he has a belief, but it's a belief. He's not backing it up, and he's not mathematically refuting it. All Sabine's saying is these two things aren't connected necessarily. And they don't seem to, they're two things. Right? To prove they're connected. He didn't. Fair. He just said there's no reason to believe they're not connected. I disagree. It looks like the math's wrong to me because it only applies to one of the two things. The math doesn't apply to both things, right? Otherwise, you could apply the math to the other thing and get the same result. And if you do that, you don't. And he admitted that. Oh, it goes to zero, and therefore it can't be correct. So it must not go to zero. It must end when the affine ends. That does not follow. Like, that's not how logic works. I don't know what else to say.
This weird interaction between Sabina and Roger Penrose shows how far off Sabina can sometimes be. Indirectly, Sabina claimed that Penrose's Nobel Prize might have been wrongfully awarded. It might very well be the case that Penrose is wrong. However, Sabina is a science communicator with over 1 million regular...
Lots of Nobel Prizes have been awarded for things that were wrong. I don't know what else to say. We awarded a whole Nobel Peace Prize to somebody who never did anything peaceful in their lives and wasn't even in office at the time, and therefore couldn't have. Nobel Prizes get misawarded all the time. This isn't an unusual circumstance even. It happens all the time. Who cares? And now what did we do? We transitioned. Like, I didn't hear Penrose refute anything that Sabine said. He didn't actually refute it. He said, well, that's silly. These two things are definitely correlated in exactly the way I predict. That's really not a refutation. A refutation would provide some kind of evidence or something, but actually what he said sort of supported her point, which is these two things are not the same thing, and therefore why would we assume they're subject to the same math? And oh, by the way, if you subject them to the same math, it come out as zero, and therefore, what? No, that's... You gotta prove it. Like, do the math, bro. And now we've transitioned to this. Right from this alleged controversy between Penrose and Sabine, which, is that who he was going after? I don't know. To, oh, she's got a YouTube channel, 1.56 million subscribers with 718 videos. Why are we transitioning to this from that previous point? What are these transitions about, and what impression and feeling do they give you?
Monthly viewers. And with that kind of viewership, she does have a responsibility to do some fact check before making such claims.
Why is he saying she didn't do a fact check? Why is he assigning her a responsibility? Do you want responsibility on fact checking, my friend? Is that what you want? Because you're not going to do well in that. You're not doing well at all with that. I'm fact checking you, and I find you to be reprehensibly manipulative towards evil. The E word. Yes, that's what's going on here. Sorry. You wanted the standard? You got the standard. Good luck.
To be fair, she is a superdeterminist, so she really has no choice but to behave this way. We are talking about her controversial position in the foundation of quantum mechanics, called superdeterminism. Superdeterminism explains quantum randomness by denying statistical independence.
About the possible values of the hidden variables. Think about the hidden variables as labels for the possible paths that the particle could take. Say the labels 1 to 3 go to the left slit and the labels 4, 5, 6 go to the right slit and the labels 7 to 12 go through both. The particle really has one of those hidden variables, but we don't know which. Then, if we measure the particles at the left slit, that simply tells us that the hidden variable was in the 1 to 3 batch. If we measure it right, it was in the 4, 5, 6 batch. If we measure it on the screen, it was in the 7 to 12 batch. No mystery, no instantaneous collapse, no non-locality. But it means that the particle's path depends on what measurement will take place, because the particles must have known already when they got on the way whether to pick one of the two slits or go through both. This is just what observations tell us. And that's what superdeterminism is. Now, you may say, well, drawing lines on YouTube isn't proper science, and I would agree. If you'd rather see equations, you're most welcome to look at my paper.
Instead of
Okay, so he says, well, she's a superdeterminist, and superdeterminism might destroy free will, according to her own video. You notice he put that on the screen. He only implied it in what he was saying. More clever manipulation, although not clever enough, apparently. Because I found it, and I'm giving it to you, showing it, right? I don't understand what this has to do with her previous statements or where this fallacy is. So far, we haven't seen a fallacy. We haven't seen her make any clearly false statements backed up by evidence that they're false. I want a clearly false statement that's backed up by evidence. If you can't do that, it's not a fallacy. It's just your opinion, your shitty opinion, no less. That's what it is. So where is this? So she's a superdeterminist. She had no choice, right? So he's taking the blame off of her again, taking the blame off of her. And just like he's not taking any credit for being positive or negative about her. He's saying, oh, this other person's opinion is this other person's opinion is that. I'm just reporting what's out there and cleverly manipulating you with video editing. Yeah, you're totally blameless in this whole thing. Totally blameless. Not.
Instead of reading her papers, let's see what Tim Maudlin, a world-leading expert, has to say about it.
There are people who, for reasons I do not fathom, I just literally don't understand their reasons, are so deeply committed to locality that they're looking for any escape route. I mean, that's more or less what we were talking about with these loopholes, with these detection loopholes, right? They don't like the idea of non-locality, and they're looking for any escape they can have from accepting it. And these detection loopholes for many years were one until the experimentalists just closed those loopholes. They're gone. So the only other loophole is they look at this and they say, well, I don't want to deny locality. I guess I have to deny statistical independence. And the problem with denying statistical independence is that it's kind of crazy, and it's crazy and conspiratorial. And on top of it, I've said and other people have said, it undermines all scientific method. I mean, if in order to get out of accepting non-locality, you deny what's required, assumptions that are required to do science, that's not a good deal. Right? That's a really bad deal.
Speaking of that.
I mean, a lot of accusations. This is bad. That's bad. No evidence. Just like, oh, you're trying to do this. And that destroys the fundamental basis of science. How? What are you talking about? Like, seriously, like, what are you saying? Are you saying that the thesis is invalid? Why? Can you get... This is the thing that bothers me more than anything in the whole world. Science is a very clever method. It does not require proving things. Science does not prove anything. Science is not truth finding. That's not what it is. The whole scientific method is based on one very simple principle. It is easier to find a problem than it is to do anything else, right? So if you have a theory and there's a problem with it, that's very easy to find. They do it through experimentation, right, and prediction. If what she's saying is incorrect somehow, just show it. It take 2 seconds. And the fact that they don't is very suspicious. I'm not saying they're wrong. I don't know because I haven't made a case. He's made a bunch of emotional statements about how he feels about these people and their project. But he hasn't actually said, oh, look, here's the evidence that they're wrong. Where is the evidence that, there's no evidence that they're wrong. They're just threatening the very fundamentals of science. Are they? How? And just explain it to me, right? Like, I think I can handle it. Actually, I think I can. And if I can't, that's on me. But you should at least try to explain it instead of just stating it axiomatically as though everybody knows this. I don't know this. And now I don't believe you because you've used a bunch of emotional pleas and statements about these people are crazy and there's no reason to believe this. And they're just trying to get out of this. And there's all these loopholes. But we closed all those loopholes. Did you? Did you close all the loopholes? Which loopholes did you close? Are they loopholes? I don't understand. Could you just take a breath and maybe explain that instead of going on and on and on about how it's conspiratorial? What's the purpose of the conspiracy and who's involved in it? Doesn't sound conspiratorial. I know who sounds conspiratorial, and it's not them.
I sent you a video. I'm unsure if you had a chance to take a look.
Yeah. I've given 3 different examples in theoretical physics where the world expert outright rejects Sabine's position. Then, what do we make of Dr. Hossenfelder?
So people who disagree with her and are alleged experts, don't listen to experts. Follow leaders, don't listen to experts. Let leaders listen to experts and then either accept or reject them and take the responsibility for that off of your shoulders. Right? So there's all these people that disagree with her. And he showed them. Also, notice what he did with the transition. So you've got Kurt Dreimungal from Theories of Everything saying, I sent you a video. Why cut it there? And then he faded it out. How clever. Evil, but clever. That's an interesting combination. He faded it out. And now we go into this controversy again. Well, I've shown you this thing. No, you didn't. You didn't show me anything of the kind. Show me more lunatics. The only thing he's shown here, aside from Sabine sounding fairly reasonable, maybe slightly hyperbolic if you're being really pedantic about it. And I love being pedantic, but like that's too pedantic even for me. Unless I'm going after somebody hard. Like if somebody gets pedantic with me, oh boy, I beat them at that game pretty quickly. I don't like that. You get pedantic with me, I'll show you pedantic. You'll find a new level of pedantic you didn't know existed because I'm capable of doing that game really better than anybody else I've ever met. Honestly. Very pedantic. Too pedantic for Mark. Sorry. And then all these other guys making emotional appeals. None of them made a scientific evidentiary appeal. None of them. 0 of them. They all used language that was defamatory of other people. Why? If you're a scientist and you have a scientific case to make, why can't you use scientific method to make it? Why can't you just bring some evidence? That's very suspicious to me. I'm not saying you're wrong, but like, I also can't agree with you either. because all you're doing is ad hominem attacks. You're not attacking the idea. You're saying conspiracy. Okay. You're the conspiracy person, though, not them. Where's the evidence? You know what makes the difference between conspiracy and non-conspiracy, among many other things? Evidence. Evidence. Conspiracies are based on lack of evidence. They don't have a lack of evidence at all, but you do, because you're just saying they're a conspiracy. What is wrong with their math or their statement or their theory? What loopholes were closed, and why is that significant? Just tell me, man. Just tell me. The fact that you're not doing that is very suspicious to me, and it leaves me no choice but to not believe you. If all you're going to do is personally attack other people, I'm not going to believe you. I'm not going to believe what your statements are. It's just not going to happen.
One thing is sure, we have to be highly skeptical when we hear from one side only, especially when that person is speaking on topics that have no consensus.
Is this some revelatory statement? Like, we can be sure of one thing. He's used that statement twice, by the way. Huh. Interesting. Why would you use that particular "we can be sure of one thing" statement twice in a video? And then he's not talking about her. He's saying in a general condition. Remember I talked about Mott and Bailey, and there's really one form of it is just the confusion of the general for the specific. That's what he's doing here. He's making a general statement in voice and putting a specific person on the screen. This is manipulation 101. And you don't want censorship on YouTube, huh? I do. I'd censor this guy first.
She is, at the moment, out of academia, and her YouTube videos and books are doing amazing. So, one thing is sure. You will not stop hearing from her. So, love her or hate her, we have to learn to live with her. Sabine Hossenfelder.
So then how does this end? It ends with him saying, basically, love her or hate her, we have to live with her. I mean, I guess. Why did he show her book at the end? Lost in Math, spinning around as though the book itself was lost. This is all pure manipulation. Pure manipulation. Now, look, I'm not like, oh, no manipulation. That's not my position at all. But when it's pure manipulation, reject it all immediately. When there's no factual information, there's no factual information in that video. Not a single fact. Nothing except what Sabine said. That was all factual. Right. And so you can look at this video, and I think it's fair to do so, as this mass attempt to get you to reject factual information, evidential information, in favor of emotional appeal. Because that's all he used in this video was emotional appeal. There wasn't a single fact refuting anything that she said. Not one. I find that fascinating. Fascinating. You don't want censorship on YouTube, huh? You sure about that? So look, I understand, again, if you didn't catch that even when I was explaining it, this is hard to catch. Again, I caught something new on the third watch myself because there's so many things here. They're using a lot of different tactics that you can read about. You know, I don't suggest that you do. It's easier to just avoid all this kind of garbage, quite honestly. The minute you sort of sense people making emotional appeals, not putting up evidence, confusing the general for the specific, putting one thing in video and saying something else, just never watch that again. It's way safer. You might miss some good information here and there. That's true. But on balance, you'll be way ahead of the game. So far ahead of the game, you won't care about your losses. That's actually really important, right? You don't have to win 100% of the time at roulette, baby. If you win 80% of the time at roulette, you're still a millionaire. It's fine. It's fine. It'll be fine. Don't worry about it. Don't worry about 20% losses. It'll be fine. Right? And that's the thing. Like, go with what works most of the time. The generalization is handy here, right? And then when you notice a specific problem, like this guy lying, or Professor Dave, who does nothing but ad hominem attacks and lie to people. Just don't engage. Like, just shut it all off, right? Engage with something else. And you can use the specific to know what to do in the general condition. You won't be right all the time. You don't have to be right all the time. And you can use the general condition to know whether or not to look for a specific exception, because that's where the opportunity is. If you have generally corrupt academia, you have one good person like Dr. Jordan Peterson, you listen to him. Yeah, you can use the corruption at the general abstraction layer of the institution to find an advantage that gives you leverage over everybody else, right? So know how to use these things. Don't use them to manipulate people with Mott and Bailey by reversing it and things like that. It's completely ridiculous. Look, thank you, everybody. I appreciate your engagement. I hope you found this helpful. Maybe it gave you some ideas, this and the Eric Weinstein video in particular. I hope they gave you ideas on what to engage with and what not to engage with. And thank you very much for your time and attention.